Okay, me and Andrew are here today to talk about Andrew Yang and the UBI.
Hello, folks.
Andrew Yang is a presidential candidate, hopeful for 2020. What's he running as, a Democrat?
Yes.
Definitely a Democrat.
Oh, most certainly.
So, why don't you tell us about why he's even on the radar?
So his main talking points are, his vision is automation is going to be displacing a lot of workers over the next several decades. And that's going to be
he would say it already has, right?
Yes, and it's been observed, mainly in places, actually the Rust Belt, where Trump won, Ohio, Pennsylvania, a bunch of stuff like car manufacturing and such. They've been replaced by a bunch of automation. I forget how many million jobs they've calculated that they think have been displaced by automation.
And these are the type of things where just like factory workers who are no longer needed, right?
Correct. They got machines to do a bunch of the work. And you can even see that some in, say, in places in New York and out on the West Coast and maybe some other places in fast food joints. They no longer have cashiers or people that take orders. They could just have an iPad or something out there, and then you could just punch your order in, and then the worker will deliver the food.
The Subway in Seneca has that. You can order completely on the screen. He also talks a lot about the truck drivers, right? He says that in 29 states, truck driving is the most common job. We have 3.5 million truck drivers. What if we don't need those anymore? What are these 49-year-old guys with a high school education going to do after they can't drive a truck anymore?
Obviously drink beer.
Yeah, probably not go back to college and get trained and learn how to code, right?
You kidding me? These are the rednecks. They're never going to go to college.
Yeah. But he pointed out these guys might not have been the fondest of school while they were in school.
Yeah. But his point is, so we're going to have 4 million or however many people, men, displaced with nothing to do. And that's never a good thing when you have that many people, particularly men, who they've spent all their life doing something and now they cannot do anything. They're going to find something to do. And it may not be a productive thing. And so he's working on a way to, he's concerned about mitigating these consequences.
Right, because the idea has always been if you're a man who's got a strong back and you're willing to work, there's always work out there for you. You can get a job and provide for your family. But he's saying those kind of jobs are disappearing.
Yep, the machines are going to take them. That's his theory.
Okay, so what's the answer according to Andrew Yang?
His answer is to implement a universal basic income. And all that is, for him, would be if you're an American and you're age 18 or older, you will get $1,000 a month. Everyone. No questions asked. All the time. That cannot be taken away, cannot be increased or decreased. It is just, it's a right of an American, just as death and taxes are.
Death, taxes, and $1,000 a month. Those are your rights.
Those are your guarantees as an American.
And he would, okay, so talk about that with the welfare system. How's that going to work? Hello. Okay, we're back. Slight interruption. What were you saying?
We were on... Shoot.
Anyway, welfare. So if you're already drawing $800 of welfare, you're not going to get $1,000 on top.
Correct. What he's saying, and I've heard different things from different sources, I'm not quite sure what he'll implement. It's either, say you get $500 a month from welfare. You can also choose to get an additional $500 to meet that $1,000, or you can just say, I'm not going to do welfare, I'm just going to grab the UBI, or I'm going to just do welfare, don't give me any universal basic income. You can't get both. It's either or.
But so the basic premise is that no American will be living out there with nothing. Everybody will have $1,000.
Yes, everyone will have at least some food to eat. Maybe it'll help pay the rent, and that's just for the dirt poor. For the lower middle class, and upper middle class, it'll serve as a nice cushion for them, to help pay the rent, pay down mortgages, maybe go on that vacation that they've been wanting to do. Just have a little something extra as padding.
Right. But for the dirt poor, it might be the difference between eating and not eating.
Yes, that's his theory.
So it's a way to disproportionately help the poor. So instead of taxing the daylights out of the rich, and that's not going to affect the poor very much, this would actually help the poor, and the rich people would be like, you know, hey, another $1,000 we can eat out again. Whatever.
What was it? Bill Gates would be like, oh, hey, another quarter. Yeah, another piece of bubble gum.
So how do you pay for the universal basic income?
His idea is to implement a value-added tax. And pretty much every developed country in the world except the U.S. has this. Essentially, it's a glorified sales tax where the raw materials of something get taxed. So the manufacturer makes a widget, and there's say a 10% tax on it. It acts like a sales tax. Then the retailer buys that widget, and whatever markup they put on it, that gets taxed at 10%. So in the end, when the consumer buys it, from beginning to end, the price goes up by only 10%. But instead of taxing the consumer at the end, it's going to tax the businesses behind the scenes.
Right. And I heard him talk a little bit, Andrew Yang, about how big businesses might complain because, like Amazon, he claimed, I guess this is true, Amazon and Netflix paid 0 taxes in 2018. I don't know if that's completely true, but there's loopholes, I guess. He said, so those guys, you know, you might say, well, how can they continue if they get the daylight's tax out of them? What he was saying was, if everybody has $1,000 in their pocket, everybody's going to have Netflix. There'll be an
increased demand.
Sure, and everyone's going to have money to throw around on Amazon.
Well, that sounds really, really nice in theory. The problem is that the money comes somewhere. Really, a universal basic income, when you think about it, it's a glorified redistribution. And so the money doesn't just appear out of nowhere. So, okay, you can have more poor people buying burgers. You can have some more people buying Netflix. But now Netflix needs to jack up their prices in order to maintain profit. And okay, they like to pick on the really big guys, Walmart, Amazon, Apple, the really big guys that they could take the hit and be fine. And they can. But it's not them I'm concerned about. The big guys, they'll do fine. But it's the medium guys and the small fry.
Right, well that's your opinion. That comes at the end.
Okay.
Okay, so what's good about the UBI? Why is this valid? And is it a new idea?
It's actually been around in different forms. Actually, the first form of the idea came out, I think, with Thomas Paine.
Yeah, I remember he said something about that, yeah.
In one of his writings, he mentioned the idea. And then I don't think it was ever seen.
Thomas Paine is 1700s?
Yeah, 1700s. Wrote Common Sense.
Yeah.
Very influential revolutionary guy. And then it didn't really appear back on the scene until the mid-1900s. Actually, a form of universal basic income almost got passed in the 60s under Nixon. It went through the House, but the Senate voted it down because the Democrats thought it wasn't generous enough.
And then it just never got implemented.
And then it's been gone nowhere. Like folks like F.A. Hayek and Milton Friedman, who are, if you don't know them, they were really, really big figureheads in the libertarian movement in the 20th century. Really, really big figureheads. And they advocated for some form of it.
And Alaska does this, right?
Alaska does a form of this with their excess oil money
that
they make.
So he's saying, whereas Alaska does this with the oil money and helps everybody out in Alaska, we're going to take the automation money, since everyone's losing their automation jobs, and we're going to give you guys all $1,000.
Because his idea is, okay, we don't have income taxes for machines or software. There's no real way to quantify that.
But you don't have to pay the machines either.
Correct. So there's no real way to quantify that. So the best way to still extract, for the government to still take the resources from that in the form of a tax would be like through a value-added tax, and then redistribute it through a universal basic income. That way you don't have 30 guys or whatever owning like 99% of the production, and they have very little cost in that, and the other folks who are just, I don't know, sitting around making sandcastles or something because they don't have anything else to do because the machines are doing everything.
So what about people who are going to say it's a terrible idea to pay people money for doing nothing? If you give everybody $1,000 a month, no one's going to be willing to flip hamburgers. No one's going to even do minimum wage jobs. You're just going to destroy the low-end jobs.
To an extent, I would say that might be true. But if you think about it, $12,000, depending on where you live, is not very much to live on. I mean, $12,000 20 years ago, that would be something. 50 years ago, that'd be a lot. But today, It's not enough to live on. Now, as far as destroying the incentives for jobs, if you compare it to, say, a clean slate, if we were starting from scratch, then yes, it would be a damaging incentive. It would be. But we are not starting from scratch. We're starting from our current welfare system.
Which
and
already
our current
is
welfare
seriously...
system is trapping people in poverty, because if they try and get out, then their benefits get reduced. So they either have to go from 0 to 60 like that and jump out of it, or have the willpower to slowly work it out. And most of the folks don't. The culture of the folks that are in welfare is, for lack of better words, it's a pretty poor culture. It's a derivative of the redneck culture, essentially, which we won't get into in this discussion.
But I mean, you see their point. It's like, I can sit here and do nothing and make this amount of money, or I can go out and hold a job and at the end of the day come home with less money. Yeah.
So universal basic income, it does reduce a lot of the risks of that. It really does. There's not nearly the negative economic effects from that perspective.
But Yang isn't necessarily talking about replacing the welfare system, right?
No, but in a way he is. He's not advocating for getting rid of what we have, but since people cannot have either or, since people cannot have both, it's an either or situation. It's not as if we're double dipping, so to speak, into both. So in effect, he kind of is. But of course, it won't replace stuff like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Right.
Which are the three biggest money hogs.
So let's move to the cons. Why does this potentially not work?
I mean, it sounds great in theory, but math is a really nasty thing in these things. It would cost us $3 trillion. Our current budget is $4 trillion. To fund this, okay, so his value-added tax, I read on his website how he plans on funding it. So it essentially is, okay, we're going to have the value-added tax, we're going to have greater economic growth because of this, and then we're going to have greater economic growth through the automation, and we're going to reduce some overhead and such like that, like welfare costs and such will go down. But here's the problem. Our budget today is $4 trillion. In order to fund this...
That's the federal government budget.
That's the federal government right now.
Yeah.
Is $4 trillion. And so to fund that, we would have to eliminate Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all current welfare, cut the military budget in half, and cut everything else remaining in half to break even. And we'd still be going into $1 or $2 trillion in debt a year. So, the value-added tax would generate $500 billion to $800 billion a year, which is not even close. And that's assuming that there's no negative knock-on economic effects yet.
If it actually works. He's also claiming that $1.8 trillion will go back into the economy, because he says if you give this money to an upper-class person, it's just going to go into their bank account. But he's saying if you give $1,000 a month to poor people, they're going to spend it because they need the money.
So his idea is the same. His assumption is the same assumption that Keynes made back in the 1930s, and that is money is better spent than saved, and that is true if a guy is saving his money by stuffing it under his pillowcase, but it's not. When you put money in a bank, the bank doesn't just sit on it, right? They have to lend it out at interest to make money back. That's how they can pay to keep the lights on, pay their employees, and give you interest. And so where does that money go? Well, to either buy new houses, or for the biggest thing is to start new businesses, or for a business to expand. It allows people to indirectly invest in new businesses without actually investing in it. And it's a no-risk thing. So,
unless the stock market.
So, no, because if banks go under, your first $250,000 is insured. Unless you're stuffing millions into a bank, there's no risk. Oh. So, so his idea that it will grow the economy, there'll be an initial growth. It'll be short term, but the problem is that you have an increased demand, you have increased consumption spending. But then you have smaller investment, because all you're doing is you're taking that investment money away from the rich, away from the corporations and the really wealthy, and you're spreading it among everyone else. And the problem is that the middle class and the lower class, we don't create jobs. We don't. We fill jobs. But we don't create jobs. It's the rich that make the jobs. It's the rich that build the factories. Yes, there are middle class people that have their small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But when you compare the amount of economic output and the amount of employment created by that versus what the really rich do and what the really big businesses do, it's not even a contest. The vast majority is still created by the rich. So in the long term, it'll actually slow economic growth due to decreased investment because, again, you're taking money from the rich and you're giving it to everyone else. So you're trying to help people, but just because you have the intent of helping does not mean you're helping.
Right. So, in conclusion, will you vote for Andrew Yang in 2020?
No, man. Trump all the way.
Trump all the way.
I mean, come on. Come on. Make America great again.
No, keep America great.
Keep America great again.
Because we're great now, right?
Oh, well, there's still a lot of things we need to work through. But no, Yang, well, if it was just about universal basic income, that'd be one thing. It'd still be terrible, but there's a whole bunch of other baggage associated that tags along with him.
Everyone has their baggage.
Well, there's not personal baggage. It's just all the other crap he's advocating for.
All right. Thanks, man.
Yep.
Good times.
Mm-hmm.